I'm Tony Lockwood, founder of Thompson Wright Partners, and I'm delighted to welcome you to the latest episode of Inside Track, where I discuss business transformation journeys with leading figures in industry. 2021 has started for many, like most of 2020, in lockdown. I, like many of you, have turned to podcasts to help me get through this period, to help me understand more about specific areas of life in business, to open me up to explore new things, and to reiterate the value of your own experience and how they can help others. Hopefully this podcast is helping you in this way, and I'm keen to expand the pod in 2021 to as wider audience as possible, because without doubt I can honestly say that the people that have joined me on the virtual sofa to date and those that have planned in the future have insights that can, and I know have, helped you in your activities. As such, please do share this pod on your social media channels. Please do subscribe so that you get notified when a new episode is released, and please do rate us and leave your reviews. These really do matter. I'm delighted to welcome Chris Gibson on the pod today. As you'll soon find out, Chris has had a very interesting career and has been involved in numerous critical campaigns and programs that have delivered, in some cases, life-saving outcomes. Through all these experiences, Chris has carried a consistency and approach that he openly shares with you. I'm sure you'll enjoy this story. Hi, Chris. Great that you can join us today. What a fascinating background you have. A career that has spanned the NHS, Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Defence, and now the private sector. You've been involved in mobilising some really big strategic operations and delivering significant programmes. So I'm really looking forward to exploring how your background has influenced the way that you deliver transformation today. So let's start by talking a little bit about the roles that you have done and the challenges that you've faced. Do you want to just give us a quick overview of Chris and your career today?
Gosh, wow, that's an intro. So I think it's important to wind back to the start of I didn't exactly perform with distinction at school. I very much like my sport and very much under-delivered on my Scottish equivalent of A-levels, so my higher results weren't the best. So the options of university were taken away from me, and we were in a recession in 1983. So I stepped into the army as a private soldier.
Right.
I didn't come from a military family, so I had no idea what to expect. So there was a bit of shock of capture when that occurred, and there was many phone calls to parents saying, "I've made a terrible decision. Can I come home?" And to which my dad was very much no. You've laid your stall out. You need to stick with it and get on with it. And in the main, I'm really glad he did tell me that, because I think I had a really exciting and slightly unique career in the army, which saw me have some success, some great responsibility, and the ability to lead and hopefully develop some really high-performing teams within that. So
it's quite interesting, actually, the timescale. I think I came out of school just the same time as you did, and a number of my friends from school went into the forces as well. And I think there was that sort of period of time, wasn't it, just around the Falklands, and
just after the Falklands. Yeah,
a lot of people were attracted into it as a result of that. I certainly, some of my friends were attracted into it as a result of what happened in the Falklands.
No, absolutely. I think it highlights the profile of some of the good that the armed forces and the camaraderie that we strive for, not only in public sector but in business as well. And that's some of the things that there's no doubt we're missing now. But that career saw me deploy on. I did a couple of specialist courses which took me into working in small teams and special forces for about 18 years. So that took me around the world to some of the places that you don't see on your Hayes and Jarvis brochures. So there was a bit of an early baptism of fire and the challenge of growing up very quickly to understand responsibilities. And some context to that is I spent 18 months in Beirut with B Squadron of 22 SES at 21 years old, trying to get Terry Waite and McCarthy and Keenan out of out of West Beirut.
Yes.
So that gives some sort of context to the type of things that you find yourselves doing after only being in the military for 3 or 4 years. And that went on and went on. So, multiple trips to Africa, South America, Central America, and the Far East.
I'm always fascinated talking to ex-forces people, because the stories that they tell and you're telling are fascinating and very difficult for people that have not been in the armed forces to appreciate, really. But one of the key questions I always ask is what going into those high pressure situations as a small team of people, you have to be completely reliant on each other, I'm assuming. What helps you, and what type of activity did you go through to help you build that camaraderie and that real teamwork? Because that must be so powerful to operate.
So you do, yeah. There's many advantages the military have. We get lots of time to train, and we train together, and we break bread together a lot, and that's very powerful about building trust and knowledge of people's strengths and areas for development. So you get to know your people really well, because and the military, the image of Windsor Davis type leadership from Ein Taf Otman, it isn't representative of what occurs. There's a lot of science and history gone into how to lead people well. And when we ask our people to step onto the battlefield and work in the extremis of human behavior, we need to know that we have trained them and prepared them to work together to create the best effect. Because of that, there's a much more holistic approach to leadership and well-being than businesses traditionally may have adopted. But there's definitely lessons that businesses can learn through that behavior. The military like to try and create the conditions. Don't always get it right, but my experience is that they try to create the conditions where people feel reasonably psychologically safe to bring the whole self to work, because we understand what's going on in the background. And we have a holistic, as I said, approach to preparing people. So going back to your question, I think there's two things. The time to get to know each other, so we trust each other, and therefore we know that there's two things. One, the worst thing we can do is let the person to the left and right down. That's the worst thing we could do, and we know that the person to the left and right would do anything to look after us, and therefore this shared this galvanization in adversity builds a really strong team. And I always ask myself, so what? No, the so what of that is some of those lessons absolutely translate into business, and business will understand, if not now, but as we come out of this really strange way of working that we have, and pulling their teams together, they'll have shared something, and there's a real opportunity to re-galvanize because of the real unique nature of how we've had to find our way through this process. So there is lessons and opportunities that will, even though it'll be difficult for businesses to pick up, there will be opportunities to bring their people together, because we've all shared the same experience, which is in the main deeply unpleasant.
Yeah, absolutely. So just going back, there's what's the old adage about team building? It's sort of forming, storming, norming, and performing. Within the military, then that sort of getting to know people and really understand, like you say, breaking bread with them, is that part of that process as well, where you get your storming out of the way, so that you can get to know people, like people, trust people, and then you can really start to perform?
I think so. Obviously, the sort of image of the sergeant's mess and warrant officer's mess, or the officer's mess, all medals and cigars and so on. It's not what it was set up for. In my view, it was set up for an area to be mentored, coached, go through cathartic experiences of sharing your fears amongst your peers, so that you can be taught in in a non-judgmental way on how to perform to a higher level.
Yeah.
And that's done in a safe environment over dinner, or in a space where you feel not judged and safer. And certainly in some of the businesses, and well, some of the public sector that have gone into hospitals, where departments tend to eat together, they seem to perform better because they know each other and they coach, and they look after people better. So the importance of it, I can't understate.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because a lot of organisations don't encourage that, do they? Especially the sort of some of the more traditional organisations, where they don't want the managers and the leaders associating or being friendly with their teams, and they almost create that division. Not necessarily to provide that opportunity for them to go through that process, but to almost keep them separate, because there's this belief that, if I get too friendly, I can't manage you effectively. But
I think there's a balance to be had. I think of myself when I was a warrant officer, and the non-commissioned officers wanted to let the hair down. There was a time for me to take the commanding officer out and say, time to go now. Because actually you don't want them compromised.
Yeah.
And as I sort of became a commanding officer, I recognized when it was time to pull away, because there is a danger of that occurring, but there's a balance to be had of how much time and how you give it, because whether you like it or not, when you lead, your people are watching you. And you can't walk by bad behavior or inappropriate behavior when you lead an organization and set the rules. So you stand the risk of being compromised if that is indeed about to occur. So it's time to remove yourself from it. I've seen people get it really wrong around social engagement. And of course you have to narrow the gap between what you say and what you do when you're a leader. If you say behavior and standards and etc. should be at X, you can't allow it to go to Y whilst you are there. You've got to close the gap, and so it's a tricky one, but I would encourage it with a caveat that you need to know when to pull away.
Right, absolutely. On your LinkedIn profile, you lead with, it's all about making people better. What do you mean by this? And tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I think, so firstly, if I go back to my military career, so I did about 19 years of being a soldier, and small, high-performing teams. And I was working with MI6 in the Second Gulf War, and we're flying up to Baghdad in a helicopter, and it crashed. And I had to change. I got a bit shaken up, and a bit of time in hospital. But I decided I had the opportunity to commission, and because the military wanted to keep me on, and I commissioned into the medics, and started to build a career again as a commissioned officer within the medics. And I started working on the trauma hospitals for Afghanistan, and then ended up leading in the design, assurance, and training of not only the military people, but all of the international participants that went to West Africa for the Ebola outbreak in 2004, 2005. So it wasn't about only making people better who were sick. It was about making people better to perform at higher standards, and making teams better through a systems approach to leadership. Where I'm very much interested in, if you look at organizations, there's traditionally three components to an organization. The physical component, which is sort of the building, the equipment, your product, if it's a physical product that you produce, and some of the ergonomics around that. The next bit after physical is the conceptual component, which is your sort of tactics, techniques, procedures, operating procedures, your business planning, etc. All of which is exceptionally important. But for me, the key ingredient and the golden thread to create an effective organization is the moral component of the organization, and how you look after your people. You've recruited them because of their talent, but if you don't allow them to flourish, you will not get their potential, and therefore you are restraining your organization by not investing in the moral component. And I've seen that in organizations that, when I was in the military, asked to go and support across government, and since leaving and going into my own business, where we've gone to support others. So so that hopefully.
And what type of thing do you do in that sort of supporting of the moral perspective then? What type of things would you typically want to be seeing in a high performing team or a high performing organization?
So it starts with an understanding of so everything is unique. Every business, every team, every individual it has individual requirements, strengths, and areas for development. And until you do a detailed understanding of that, you will not be able to come up with the appropriate solution. So whatever we do, we conduct an understand phase of it, and from that we will go into an advisory phase with the organization, to really highlight where we are seeing strengths to being reinforced, and areas for development that are showing as weaknesses, and basically we collaborate with the senior leadership team to gain an understanding of what we've seen and a rationale as to it, and then provide our thoughts on how to solutioneer better outputs or better support to the areas that we find that are at flaw. So let me an example of that would be, I was taken on as a special advisor to Rory Stewart when he was Minister of Justice. To support him on the 10 prison project, which was a 12-month project. I was brought in 2 months into it, to reduce the level of violence in the 10 most violent prisons in England. My role was really to look at the cultural aspects of this and try to understand why it was occurring, and provide a set of solutions and interventions to take that. So when I conducted the understand phase of these 10 estates, it became really apparent to me that where the deficit was the investment in the moral component, not of the prisoners, but of the staff. Right. And their confidence and competence was suboptimal, to say the least. It was at rock bottom, and there was many things that came to light. My unconscious bias came out really clearly. I had a perception of what a prison officer would look like and be, and it was far removed. The first prison officer I spoke to was like 25 years old, maybe a bit older. Started chatting to him, said, how did you find yourself in here? He said, and he tells me when he finished his PhD at Cambridge, he felt that he would join the prison service because it was the right thing to do. Right. So we have a PhD Cambridge grad, working in a £22,000 per annum activity because he felt it was the right thing to do. So you realize that you have to get rid of your unconscious bias first of all. Then you have to understand what the issue was, and their confidence and competence to be able to deliver the required effect was completely lacking. And through that, I trained 100 plus specially selected prison officers who, in their coaching and mentoring roles, so I could send teams of 10 to 12 into each of those establishments and start mentoring and coaching So a fix and flight approach of building resilience into the staff, and so that we grew their confidence and grew their competence to carry out core tasks. And strangely enough, yeah, we had some physical and conceptual work going on as well. The other components we made much easier understood and applicable tactics, techniques, and procedures for them to follow, and we improved some of the physical conditions of the prison at the same time. But the reality was, by getting after it and doing the understand phase, we understood how to close the gap, and within 10 months we reduced the violence in 9 of the 10 prisons. Right. The 10th one, didn't want to follow our scheme of maneuver, but the results spoke for themselves. It was the only one that didn't move.
Right. So when interestingly enough, though, when you said the 10th one didn't want to move, is that what the leadership within that prison environment just didn't want to believe that you had the answers? Didn't
buy the vision, and but I'm much more comfortable with that. When I ran the Ebola piece, which was really high pressured, this is not a terrible virus that COVID-19 is. This is Ebola virus disease, where you have a 95th percentile of fatalities, not a 1 or 2% of fatalities, and we were under real pressure to get this right, to deliver first world care in the rigor of a West African jungle against a virus that we'd never engaged with before. And I found that 2 senior members of my team wouldn't buy what we were trying to deliver, and wouldn't engage in the vision and the mission and the lines of operation set as part of this really dynamic training and assurance process.
Yeah.
And on reflect, it really damaged me. That I think that I was really hurt that they wouldn't follow it, no matter what I tried. They weren't going to shift. When things had calmed down, I had time to sort of reflect on it, and some of the reading I did, it became really apparent that actually that's very normal on any change program, that you will have a small percentile that will not do and not move on any change program whatsoever. And going into other projects, I've been much more comfortable with that. Yeah. I really struggled with it. I have to say, I really struggled with it.
I think we've spoken about it quite a lot on previous podcasts, and I used to call those people the terrorist of a program, which perhaps isn't the appropriate terminology these days. But other people have been talking about red, amber, and green type of people, and those red people, as you say, you need to identify them really early, because if you don't, they can have a big influence on the outcome of the program. And tend to attract other people towards them.
Yeah, we were sending out 1,200 doctors, nurses, and medics to deal with this, and these was 2 people in the system that I was investing way too much time in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
and I think my lesson was, really, leadership can be really lonely. You're not going to make everyone happy all of the time. If you want to do that, go and sell ice cream somewhere, because don't try and lead an organization, because you're not going to be able to achieve that. But I think you have to go through it to experience it, to learn it, to understand that actually, it's all right. It's all right to have that.
What do you think are the key components for delivering successful transformation now? What are the sort of your must-haves that you look out for?
So, Simon Sinek talks about, it starts with why. So why are we going to change is really important. And what would the benefit be? Once you've agreed that, I think, setting the vision of where you want to, what does Nirvana look like? So what's this higher level achievement that we can bring our people towards, that creates a common language and understanding? So if you can get that right, I think that's really important. And I speak to, I'm on the faculty of the Premier League Managers course at the FA, and I talk about vision setting with them quite a bit as they take over a new tenure, because it is something that allows higher level performance to occur through setting a vision. I think the US military at their staff college talk about it as being a fundamental component of leadership and command, that you create a vision. And then from that, all of the other activity can take place. So setting the more operationalized bits of business, so sort of setting the mission and the lines of operation that come out, creating decisive conditions in your plan that needs to be achieved within timelines, understanding that the business will have something that you want to preserve at all costs, so like a positive center of gravity, and conversely, it will have a negative center of gravity, which is usually the catalyst for change to occur in the first place. And if you can identify that and try and erode it really quickly, you start moving, creating the conditions for that activity to succeed. So yeah, it comes from, there's lots of lessons that I've taken from the military into business, but I go back to what I said earlier. When you see performance in a terrain where the extremes of human behavior occur, you understand what works well with people.
Yeah,
it's never really about the product, it's about the people that produce the product. And if you get them aligned and performing and motivated and supportive of each other, you have created the conditions for success, I believe.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting as well that you mentioned your sporting experiences as well. There's a podcast I've been listening to quite a lot, the High Performance Podcast with Jake Humphreys and Damien. I can't remember his surname now. But a really great podcast that sort of talks to sports people, business people, musicians, and actors about high performance. And it's I think it's quite interesting just listening to those individuals that have operated in high performance teams and getting the common understanding, whether it's in business, whether it's in sporting, whether it's in sort of acting, in music and musicians, and now talking to you in terms of the military. There's those common themes that are absolutely critical to get in place if you want to operate as a high performing team, and that's the same in delivering transformation and having that high performance team to help deliver that transformation with an organization.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think there's sort of 5 key elements to sort of building and sustaining a high performance organization. I think one is setting the vision, which we already discussed. I think the second is to acknowledge that you need to recruit and retain ability.
Mm-hmm.
So you there's only so much potential every person has. I'm acutely aware of my lack of potential, but you have to be very honest about that.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to, Barcelona Football Club or the All Blacks won't recruit someone that's very poor at football or rugby.
Yeah.
But so there has to be a benchmark of ability, and when we have to be honest about that. But taking that forward into the other 3 components, I think that performance discontent is really important. That there's always improvements that can be made, I think. But how that's done is really important. So I think back into sport and into the military, reinforcing of success it is how to create a positive culture where we talk about what we got right rather than focus on what we got wrong.
Yeah.
And so that really helps with regard to high performance. I think discipline and setting boundaries is really important, whilst being cognizant of empowering your people, And I ask listeners on to this to think about it, because I think it's really important with regard to empowerment of your staff. There's a hierarchy of it, and it starts with at the bottom. Are your people, waiting to be told? Are they asking to be told? Are they seeking approval for a recommendation? Are they seeking approval for an action they've already taken? Or at the top of the triangle, top of the hierarchy, are they getting on with it and informing you routinely? If you've got them towards the top, that's brilliant. But if your people are waiting to be told to do something, you're not empowering them. So just something to think about. And I think the last, we've talked about discipline. The last one is understanding politics and the politics of the organization, internal and external. I think is really important. So that's sort of the 5 facets that I try and look at.
And they are so interdependent on each other, aren't they?
Yeah.
Like you say, the politics of it all will have a massive impact upon the ability of the frontline staff to feel empowered, and to take chances and to innovate, which are critical components of successful business.
Yeah, I mean, innovation going forward, I think will be really important. And I've spoken a bit on innovation at some academic institutes, and I can wax lyrical about innovation, but maybe it's for another chat. But I'm very focused on disruptive innovation, and empowering people within the workplace to innovate.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's the only way moving forward, isn't it? It's having that framework that people feel comfortable to try different things, and not feel threatened by if I make a mistake or if I do something wrong, I'm going to get whacked over the head.
Absolutely create the conditions for fast failure and fast learning. Don't worry about it. You will as long as you learn from it, take it forward. And I've tried. I'm not saying any of this is easy in business, but you will get better results by giving the freedom of movement for you. Allow your people to try things. It will not always work, but you will get better results in the long term.
Absolutely. We always talk on these podcasts about how stressful life can get as you're delivering programs, and I'm sure just listening to you and some of the things that you've been involved in some very stressful situations. So what do you do to help to alleviate that stress personally?
I've tried to read a lot on the subject, and one of the ththings that there's a great book, I'm trying to remember the author as we're speaking, but basically called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And the reason that zebras don't get ulcers is that they don't respond to thoughts of the lions. They only respond to real lions.
Right.
Whereas we as humans respond to the thoughts of lions.
Yeah.
We stress about things that are in the future. We stress about things that have already passed. And I've tried to learn to deal with the here and now much better, and stop worrying so much. But I think there's sort of 6 things that I've tried to do in getting my head in the right place to build my individual resilience. And so I try to reframe my thinking. I try to manage my emotions. I try to moderate my stress levels. I really try hard to be positive all the time. Mm-hmm. Positivity is really good for your resilience. I understand how important it is to remain connected. In these difficult times of separation, the body craves oxytocin, the release of that hormone, which is brought around through human connection. And when we don't have it currently, we're missing out on something. Yeah. So I try to exercise, to replace some of that void, but whilst remaining cognizant of keeping really connected with friends and family and colleagues. And all of that gives me much better clarity and purpose, clarity of purpose. Sorry.
Yeah.
And if you know your direction of travel, it becomes better to reframe, and stay focused and not worry about the lions, but only the ones that are in front of you. So, yeah, I think that for me, that's that I've learned really, because I have pushed myself into unsafe space mentally through some of the tasks. My worry that, I never worried about myself. I always worried about what consequences of my leadership could do to others. And because it's such a lonely place when you're sat sometimes at the top or near the top, you've got to find, I think, a way of doing that. So I speak on resilience as now, having been through the rough end of stretching my bandwidth. But those are the sort of 6 things that I try to do.
Yeah, they're great. Great 6 things. But I have to say that image of the zebra and the lion will stay with me. I think I've not come across that book, but I definitely like the analogy. It's a great analogy. So just coming back to one thing you just mentioned there about as a leader, it can be quite a lonely place. What have you done, and what success have you had in the past around helping linking together with other people in that sort of peer group to try to give you some sort of safe environment in which to discuss your the challenges and equally the opportunities that you're facing?
I think what you're doing right now, Tony, is a conduit for those that are feeling lonely at the top to sort of gain an understanding of and rationalization of their fears and anxieties around are they doing the right thing. What I was lucky enough to do is I've always had good leadership I've had those above me that have really cared about me, and I've kept that relationship up when all of us have sort of left the military, and I've sort of found them to be great mentors as I've gone forward to where I can pick up the phone at any stage and say, I'm on this project, I'm really not sure if I'm doing the right thing here. This is the set of circumstances. What do you think? And so having that safe space to have those conversations, I think, is really important. And I would encourage, certainly from my experience of getting a mentor, is worth its weight in gold. There's very few people that have the strength of character to lead in complete isolation. Because actually you might be getting it wrong.
Well, I was just about to say that those people are probably very, very blinkered, and operating very much in a silo, and will have no idea when they're coming to a cliff edge. And we've all probably had experiences of people that appear to be great leaders and then just literally falling off a cliff edge because they've not noticed it and they've had no one to talk to tap them on the shoulder to say, hey, you need to pull back a little bit here.
No, absolutely. So that would be me. If you wanted a top tip, that would be it. Get a mentor, because I have found it to be quite isolated on occasion.
Well, you beat me to it, because I was going to say, if you can boil your experience down to one thing in one takeaway, what would that be? So would that be a mentor, or is there other thing? Is there something else, do you think?
Well, I think, that's one component. I think don't give up on learning. Don't give up on learning. I think there's a balance to be had, of course, but, I know I could be so much better at many things. And I strive to do that and not be closed to new ways. This business I have two businesses. One's a medical company that supports in the main the NHS, although we work with the health executive in the Republic of Ireland. But the other business I have is called the Growth Pod, and we do well-being support about generating people first cultures, that which I'm passionate about, and some of that involves working with really interesting people who are practitioners of many diverse elements of well-being. So I find myself doing gong baths and meditations and things that, when I reflect back into my military career, would be seen as certainly quirky at best, and quite bizarre at worst, I'm sure. But but all of these I find really interesting, and in the main, broadly beneficial. Some of the stuff I don't particularly think I'll go back and do again, but I'm always trying to learn. And if you can keep your mindset open, I think that's really healthy as well.
I remember you telling me about some of the retreats that is it just outside Harrogate, I think?
That's right, yeah.
So they did sound fascinating. So if people want to find out a little bit more about that, what's the website?
So it's the Growth Pod, Harrogate, and the wellness retreat where our offices are is called the Acorn Wellness Retreat, which is a real 5-star residential, authentic well-being wellness centre, which does great stuff. it's there to support.
Well, we'll put a link in the show notes as well, so hopefully
thanks, Tony. That's
people are
very
looking for that. They can click on it. Well, thank you very much, Chris. That was fascinating. A great show, and I'm sure there's lots of things that people will take from it and be able to apply within the programs that are running at the moment. So thank you very much.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks, Tony.
Okay, cheers. Wow, thanks, Chris, for your openness and honesty today. I'm sure that our audience will be able to take as many aspects of what you've spoken about that will help them now and into the future. We've started to publish the pod on YouTube, so if you get a chance, please do subscribe to the YouTube channel. This will help us to get the message out there to as many people as possible. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with another great episode, so thank you for listening and see you then.